So in this segment, we're going to be talking about the guilty verdict on Derek Chauvin. Derek Chauvin, for anyone who doesn't know, is the now former police officer who was convicted of murder of George Floyd. So if anyone who hasn't seen the video, I'd give you a trigger warning before you watch it. But he kneeled on George Floyd's neck for, I think it was around between 7 and 9 minutes. I can't remember exactly which one it was, but not. Genuinely what he was thinking, I have no idea, and it's good news he's been punished. Chauvin looked very confused when the guilty verdict was given, so let's just watch that quickly.
Members of the jury, I will now read the verdicts as they will appear in the permanent records of the 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota, County of Hennepin, District Court, 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota Plaintiff versus Derek Michael Chauvin, Defendant. Verdict, Count 1. Court file number 27, CR 20-12646. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 1, unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:44 p.m.
He looks very angry and confused right now. I think more confused than anything.
Signed, juror foreperson, juror number 19. Same caption, verdict count 2. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 2, third-degree murder, perpetrating an eminently dangerous act, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Signed by jury foreperson, juror number 19. Same caption, verdict count 3. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 3, second-degree manslaughter, culpable negligence, creating an unreasonable risk, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Jury foreperson 019. Members of the jury, I'm now going to ask you individually if these are your true and correct verdicts. Please respond yes or no. Juror number 2, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 9, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Yeah, I think he knows, bruv. He's done. He's done out here. They are going to file, I think, for an appeal. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Also, we're going to be talking about the Minneapolis Police to face a federal police probe. So it looks like the feds are getting involved there as well. So, a U.S. jury has found a former police officer guilty of murder over the death of African-American George Floyd on a Minneapolis street last year. The footage went all over the world, and man, it was one of the most difficult things I've watched, because I was just like, bro, just get off him. Get off him. He's dying. And, you essentially watch a man be suffocated to death, not through strangulation, but, the sheer weight of another human being, a man, he's a not a bulky guy, but he's a big guy, especially under all of his gear, his police gear as well. So what Chauvin was thinking, I have no idea. And he's got a long time, hopefully, in prison to really think about his actions. So Chauvin was filmed kneeling on Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes during his arrest, so apologies for that, it was more than 9 minutes. The widely watched footage sparked worldwide protests against racism and excessive force used by police. Chauvin was found guilty on all 3 charges: second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and manslaughter. His bail was immediately revoked and he was placed in police custody. Sentencing is likely to happen in 2 months, and Chauvin could spend decades in jail. So it says here that the second-degree murder carries a maximum sentence of 40 years in prison. Third-degree murder is punishable by up to 25 years in prison, and second-degree manslaughter is punishable up to 10 years. So he could be facing, potentially the rest of his life in prison if the sentencing is, around, say, for the first one about 30 years. He could easily spend the rest of his life there. Chauvin is expected to appeal the verdict. So what I've read, because Maxine Waters apparently was saying like, he's got to be found guilty and we need to get more confrontational, if nothing happens. I think that's what she said anyways. It does mention it in another article that there's potential grounds for an appeal, or Chauvin's lawyer tried to appeal for a mistrial, but the judge said, look, that might be grounds for an appeal, but I'm not giving you a mistrial. Police officers have been rarely convicted, if charged at all, for deaths that occur in custody, and the verdict in this trial has been widely seen as an indication of how the US legal system will treat such cases in future. Look, this case is an anomaly because they can't argue that George Floyd was armed. They can't argue he was dangerous. The man was face down on the ground. He was face down. He couldn't have threatened anyone. in that position. So, I don't think this will change anything to do with, the US legal system. We saw a video recently of a 13-year-old boy who was gunned down by police who claimed he had a gun in his hand. Someone, I think another girl was gunned down by police for having a knife. I think that one's confirmed she actually did have a knife. But, we've seen in Europe and other places in the world where you can use non-lethal tactics to deal with that situation. Also, the fact that police officers have non-lethal weapons on them. Why do you have those if you're not going to use them in that case? But I suppose, the police would argue that if we didn't get involved at the time, then someone else would have been killed, a civilian. So, maybe that one they can get away with, but the one with the 13-year-old kid, no. 3 other officers are due to face trial later this year on aiding and abetting charges. So they're the ones who, kind of kept the crowd back and, were witnessing what was going on. So the 12-member jury took less than a day to reach their verdict, which followed a highly charged 3-week trial that left Minneapolis on edge. Several hundred people cheered outside the court. Floyd's family lawyer, Ben Crump, said it marked a turning point in the history of the US. I think you might be able to make that point, but I don't think it will. I genuinely don't. Painfully earned justice has arrived. He tweeted, I think that was Joe Biden who tweeted that. I'm not sure. No, it wasn't Joe Biden who tweeted that. I think that was the lawyer. President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris called the Floyd family after the verdict. Mr. Biden was heard saying that at least there is some justice. In a nationally televised remark shortly after, Biden said systemic racism is a stain on the whole nation's soul, which is true, but I don't think you're the one who should really be massively pointing that out, despite the fact that you're president, given your past. Ms. Harris urged lawmakers to pass the George Floyd bill aimed at reforming policing in the US. Again, you're a bit dodgy in yourself, Kamala Harris, but, I'll go down a rabbit hole if we have to talk about both of them. The Minneapolis Police Federation, a not-for-profit organisation representing police, said they respected the jury's decision. We also want to reach out to the community and still express our deep remorse for their pain, blah, blah, blah. According to reports, one of the most likely avenues for appeal is the huge publicity given to the case, with the defence team arguing that this might have influenced the jury. However, the jury were in a sealed-off hotel with no outside access, so it's very unlikely that happened. So we'll see if there is some sort of appeal. The presiding judge, Peter Cahill, said on Monday that public comments made by Democrat Congresswoman Maxine Waters could be grounds for an appeal. Over the weekend, Ms. Waters urged protesters to stay on the street, get more confrontational if Chauvin was acquitted. The thing is, right, that's why you should be very careful about talking about court cases whilst they're ongoing, because they can use your words to influence a potential mistrial or an appeal. So be very careful with what you say during trials. I try. There's a reason why there's certain court cases I don't cover for that reason. Activists say justice has been done and they will feel as though a weight has been lifted. Their relief was shared by many in the city. I could imagine so. Few officers are charged with manslaughter or murder, and fewer still are convicted. That's just the way America is. But protesters say the calls for justice for George Floyd do not stop after this verdict, which I hope they carry on. I hope they carry on, because there are many more instances where unarmed people, specifically minorities, specifically black people, are killed by police officers and face little to no punishment. So, the activists do have to keep the pressure on. The 46-year-old brought a pack of... This is about what happened with George Floyd. He bought a pack of cigarettes at a convenience store in Minneapolis. A store assistant believed he'd used a counterfeit $20 note and called the police after Mr. Floyd refused to give the cigarettes back. And obviously we know what happened from there. So what happened during the trial? The jury heard from 45 witnesses and saw several hours of video footage. Some of the most powerful testimony came from eyewitnesses. Several broke down in tears as they watched graphic footage of the incidents and described feeling helpless as events unfolded, because had they gotten involved and done something, the police would have gunned him. The police would absolutely gunned him. Mr. Floyd's girlfriend of 3 years and his younger siblings also took to the stand. Expert witnesses on behalf of the state testified that Floyd died from a lack of oxygen. The defense tried to argue it was drugs and an overdose, etc. But anyone who watched the video would know what happened. So Chauvin himself chose not to testify, invoking his right to, I think it's the Fifth Amendment, the right to not self-incriminate himself, the right to not incriminate himself. So what are the charges? Manslaughter is when someone unintentionally causes another person's death. In second-degree murder, the act that led to someone's death could have been intentional or unintentional. The maximum sentence for this charge is 40 years in prison. Third-degree murder means that an individual has acted in a way that endangered one or more people, ending in death. And we can see that it's pretty clear that's what happened. So this is how the jury reached their decision. The jury remained anonymous and unseen throughout the trial, but its demographics skewed younger, more white and more female. So I wonder what that impact had on their conviction. After both sides presented closing arguments on Monday, the jury was isolated in a hotel with no outside contact, so they could not deliberate on a verdict, a process known as sequestration. I think that's how you pronounce it. So the Maxine Waters argument it may not fly because the jurors were in a sealed hotel, but you never know with America. Jurors had to agree agree on a unanimous verdict and were told they could not return home until they had made their decision. I wonder, if anyone tried to say that Chauvin was innocent. I do wonder. So we've got some sort of investigation here from the feds. So the U.S. federal investigation has been launched into policing practices in the city of Minneapolis a day after one of its former officers was convicted of the murder of George Floyd. So the Justice Department will look at whether there had been a pattern of unconstitutional or unlawful policing. Attorney General Merrick Garland has said, this is great news, but the thing is, it's very consensual. So, there's going to have to be. This is more of a. It looks like they're more of a discussion thing rather than aggressive action from the DOJ, which is just ridiculous. It follows national outrage over the murder of George Floyd by Derek Chauvin. The former officer was convicted of all charges against him on Tuesday. Chauvin was filmed kneeling on Floyd's neck. We've mentioned this stuff. His death sparked outrage. So this is about the investigation from the DOJ. It will examine whether its treatment, so this is about the Minneapolis Police Department, whether its treatment of those with behavioural health disabilities is unlawful, while looking at the effectiveness of current systems of accountability and whether other mechanisms are needed to ensure constitutional and lawful policing. I think what they have to do is create a system where police officers can put in anonymous complaints against other police officers and be investigated that way, or they have it so the FBI investigates any kind of wrongdoing through police officers giving anonymous statements about other police officers who may have committed crimes. Also, the fact that all police officers should be wearing body cams, and if any police officer is found to have damaged their body camera or deleted footage, they should immediately get fired and they should immediately be punished for it. Garland said that both the community and law enforcement would have to take part if this investigation were to be successful, and he has already started reaching out to both. So again, this is a consent thing. Do law enforcement want to be involved in this? And if they say no, what are you going to do? If unlawful patterns and practices were found, he promised to issue a public report and bring a civil lawsuit. So what if law enforcement just say no? They say no, you can't. No, we're not going to let you. Because that's what it seems like. It's very based on consent. So what does this probe mean? So there's some analysis here. This process happened after the high-profile death of black men at the hands of police in Ferguson, Missouri, as well as Chicago and Baltimore. At the end of the investigation, the DOJ issues a report that often contains details that the public would have no access to. They may look at arrest statistics or any evidence of racial bias for signs of racism in emails sent by police officers. The report leads to an agreement or a consent decree between the DOJ and the department to fix specific troublesome practices. The DOJ should not be doing this by consent. The DOJ should be saying, there are problems within your police department. There are problems within your state, and we're going to check out everything. We're going to investigate police officers. We're going to check out exactly what's going on because your police officers have not acted with due cause. It wasn't, one bad apple in Chauvin. There were 4 of them. Chauvin won, and the other 3 that stood around like idiots. So the argument that's just a few bad apples. You had 4 police officers. The 4 police officers who were called onto the scene all failed. So I wonder how many other officers have done, potentially illegal activities within Minneapolis and other PDs around the USA. So ridiculous stuff here from the Department of Justice. This is optics from the DOJ and Garland. It should not be done by consent. It should be, we're investigating you punks because you done messed up. You cannot do your jobs properly. Serve and protect, not attack minorities and other people. Minneapolis could face real legal consequences if benchmarks laid out in the agreement are not met. So again, they're going to agree to this. What if Minneapolis say we don't agree to this? However, the process can be slow, bureaucratic, and largely invisible to the community, and sometimes departments operate under federal monitoring for years, so nothing will really come of this. And past experience show that these agreements do not lead to an end to controversial incidents. So this is just posturing from Garland. This nice mugshot here from Chauvin. It's good news that he's been found guilty. We're going to wrap the video up there, and it doesn't end here. For anyone who thinks that, activism ends here because one police officer was convicted, you have to push for broader reforms within America, because the police departments will not reform themselves. They have no interest to reform themselves, and they are desperate to protect each other because they know at the end of the day, if something happens to them, if they commit a wrong action, they want the other police officers to back them. So what you have to do is force reform from above. That's what has to happen. The conviction of Derek Chauvin's a big one, but there was so much footage and so much evidence against Derek Chauvin that if there wasn't a guilty trial, then that would show you that there are further systemic problems within America, that a police officer who's pretty much banged to rights here, if that person was let go, then I don't know what that means for America as a country, what that means for your judicial system, what that means for your jury-based system as well. But there's that half, and obviously the bits about the FBI or the DOJ getting involved is just a farce because nothing will come of it. So, and what it shows you is that America, you won't learn your lesson because you keep electing people and you keep putting people in place who fail to reform things. Joe Biden picked Garland as his AG. Garland has, by the looks of things, he wants to maybe change things, but he's doing it by consent, which will mean nothing will change, fundamentally. So, what more is there to say apart from these guys are a bunch of frauds? And, let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.